Hi, this is Welcome to Self, and I'm your host, Dr. Hayley D. Quinn, fellow human, business owner, and coach for women like you who want to increase your own self-care and self-compassion, change the relationship you have with yourself and your business, and elevate your business to a new level so you can live the full and meaningful life you desire. Welcome to Self is a podcast for women business owners. It is a place where you can come and learn about the practices that will assist you as a business owner, get tips on how to engage in your business in a way that is sustainable for you. Realise that you're not alone in the ways that you struggle, and have your curiosity piqued on various topics as I chat to wonderful guests and bring you solo episodes. This is a place to remember that you are human first and have different tasks in your business and different roles in your life that need your attention, and for that you need to take care of yourself in the best way you can. This is a place of nourishment, growth, and helpful information. A place where you can learn ways to assist you and your business to thrive. Hi, and welcome to another episode and another great guest. I was connected with my next guest by a previous podcast guest, and I'm very thankful for this connection as I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and I'm excited to bring it to you. If you enjoy this episode or any of the other episodes, I'd really love it if you would leave a rating and review. This is the best way for podcasts to reach a wider audience and get helpful information into the ears of more people. So let me introduce you to my next guest, Dr. Robert L Leahy. Dr. Leahy completed a Postdoctoral Fellowship in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania Medical School, under the direction of Dr. Beck, the founder of cognitive therapy. Among his many accomplishments, Dr. Leahy is the past president of the Association for Behavioural and Cognitive Therapies, past president of the International Association of Cognitive Psychotherapy, past president of the Academy of Cognitive Therapy, the director of the American Institute for Cognitive Therapy, New York, and clinical professor of psychology in psychiatry at Weill Cornell University Medical School, New York. Dr. Leahy is the honorary lifetime president, New York City Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Association, and a distinguished founding fellow, diplomate of the Academy of Cognitive Therapy. He has received the Aaron T. Beck Award for outstanding contributions in cognitive therapy, and in 2023, he was named the Global Ambassador by the Association of Cognitive and Behavioural Therapies, and he also received the Outstanding Clinician Award from ABCT. As well as being an editor on journals, serving on scientific advisory committees, and being a frequent keynote speaker throughout the world, Dr. Leahy is author and editor of 29 books, including his latest book, If Only, Finding Freedom from Regret, and The Worry Cure, which received critical praise from the New York Times and has been selected by Self magazine as one of the top 8 self-help books of all time. It's safe to say he knows his stuff, and on top of all these accomplishments, he's a really lovely person. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Robert Leahy to the podcast. So, Hi, Bob. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you.
Haley, it's a pleasure to meet you, and I hope I can understand your Australian accent,
I've kind of got a blend of an English-Australian accent, so hopefully it's okay for you. So could we start with you telling us a bit about yourself and your work?
Yeah, so I've written a lot of books for clinicians and for the intelligent layperson. And what I've been interested in the past, I'd say 15 years, is how we deal with our emotions. So, I was trained in cognitive therapy by Beck, but I've sort of moved to a view that there are certain emotions that are universal that we really need to have a more integrative approach to. So, for example, emotions like jealousy, like my wife or partner is interested in somebody else, envy, somebody's getting ahead of me, ambivalence, I can't stand having mixed feelings, boredom, I should never be bored, regret. These are lived emotions. I think all of us can identify with them at some point, and they're complicated. And so when I kind of looked at the literature in cognitive behavior therapy, it really didn't seem to be any integrative, sophisticated approach that made sense to me. So I just got interested in emotions because I see patients and I'm a human being, and I think that there's a tendency that some people have to think that cognitive behavior therapy is against emotion, which I can understand that it can sometimes seem overly rational and somewhat invalidating.
Yeah.
But I think we can expand our approach to have a humanistic cognitive behavior therapy.
Yeah. So like you say, you've written many books, and I was looking on my bookshelf the other day, and one of my first early books was actually one of yours when I first qualified as a psychologist. So this feels really nice actually interviewing you today. But your latest book is If Only, Finding Freedom from Regret. So could you start by defining for the audience what you mean by regret and what could be some of the impacts of this?
Sure. Yeah, so regret is a feeling of discouragement or sadness or even remorse in some cases over something I did or did not do, or anticipating having regret about something I might do or not do. So the impact of regret, which is quite interesting, just sidling that in a study of recording conversations among college students, the most commonly mentioned emotion was love or emotions about love. The second was regret.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a very, very common emotion that people, I regret that, or I shouldn't have done it, or that was so foolish. And, we're constantly hearing ourselves or others talk about regret. So it's a very common emotion. And the impact of it is, as I said, there are two ways of having regret about things I in the past or things in the future, things I did or did not do. So, for example, people who have a lot of regret about the past tend to ruminate, criticize themselves, label themselves, to become depressed, not really be in the present moment, because if you're ruminating about the past, you're not in the present moment. And in terms of anticipating regret, people who are anxious or depressed might anticipate, if I do this, I'll regret this. So if I have social anxiety, if I go to the party and introduce myself to Haley, I might regret it because she might think I'm boring or obnoxious or something like that. So we anticipate regret. It keeps us from doing things, keeps us from trying things. But there are also people, and one of the things we'll talk about is that a lot of regret can be useful. So, for example, we often, we have to get rid of regret and don't have any regrets. But if you think about people who are impulsive, who spend too much money, overdrink, overeat, act out inappropriately, whatever, it's that when they're making the decision, when they're acting impulsively, they're not anticipating that they're going to regret the consequences of what they do. So some people have a deficit in regret, and that's a real problem. That perhaps in some ways that's the overlooked problem with regret. The people who have the incapacity of either anticipating regret or from learning from their regrets.
Yeah.
And we see that all the time.
Yeah. So it can actually be a helpful thing, can't it? If you factor it into some of your decision making, like you say, if you're a particularly impulsive person or you've got behaviors that are really not helpful and perhaps harmful for you in your life, then actually anticipating some regret could be a good thing. But for some other people, this anticipatory regret could get them quite caught up in anxiety and concerns. And as you were talking, I'm wondering if people who are quite perfectionistic, would they be more likely to be caught up in this sense of I might regret this?
Absolutely. So, several things. One, there's a particular software thing called Google Ngram, where you could Google on this platform how often a particular word appears in published language. So in English, how often does regret appear? So between 1870 and let's say 2022, regret after 1980 increases tremendously in terms of being mentioned in published books or articles, whatever. So regret has become much more common than it was 40 years ago. Similarly, at the same period, referring to perfectionism being perfect also increases. So it's an interesting thing. It's kind of like, I think in America and in other parts of Europe and Australia, I'm sure that, at 1980, after 1980, you had an increase in sort of a higher level of ambition, higher inequality within society, and people thinking that I should be able to accomplish anything. So you have this increase of wealth. I can do anything, which is a real trap. If you think you can do anything, then you're really thinking you can defy the laws of gravity, which doesn't work. It's not a good career choice. But the other thing in terms of perfectionism, Haley, there's a concept in economic theory and decision making called maximizers versus satisfiers. So maximizers are people who are trying to get the very best. If they go to a restaurant and the menu comes and they start doing pairwise comparisons of the 50 options on the menu. Whereas I would order a tuna fish sandwich and get out of the restaurant. So the maximizers think I have to have the very best in order to be satisfied. And what we know is that maximizers take longer to make decisions. They require more information. And even with the outcome, they're less satisfied. And even if the outcome is objectively better than the outcome for a so-called satisfier, they're still dissatisfied because they compare to what they imagined. So maximizers are kind of a version of our perfectionism. They have what I call existential perfectionism. My life is going to be just perfect and I'm going to have the perfect job and all of that. So that really interferes with decision making. And it makes it hard to make changes, to take risks, and to live with the real world. I mean, we're going to live in the real world and everything involves trade-offs. It's kind of like if you're married or unmarried, whatever job you have, there are going to be pros and cons.
And there's such a cognitive load to that, isn't there? I mean, there is just such a heavy cognitive load to such intense decision making. And when we think about the prevalence of burnout, particularly, a lot of my audience are business owners, is that stuff's got to kind of impact the risk of burnout for people as well.
Right. Yeah. In some ways, sometimes you have to think it's only a job, right? It's not my life. And one way of putting it in perspective, Haley, is they've looked at the regrets of people in hospice who are facing imminent death. What do they regret? They regret that I spent too much time at work, that I wasn't true to myself, I wasn't true to my feelings, I didn't see my friends enough, I didn't tell people I love them. Things that your grandmother might have told you are the things in life. That's the bottom line when you're facing death. That's what really counts.
Yeah, absolutely. Not I should have spent a few more hours, working on that document or, doing a bit more marketing or something. It's not really what's going to matter to us, is it, when we're in our final days?
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot to be learned from looking at how people face the end and how we think about what do we say to them? Oh, you could have made more money, or you could have published more books or articles, or whatever, right? As opposed to I think when we think about people who died, we think about ordinary moments, that, walking along a hiking trail or making love with somebody that you cared for, those are the things that really matter. And regret, in a way, is saying that this alternative that you missed out on, that would have made all the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm
It's like
curious.
a cancel.
It's what, sorry?
A cancel emotion. It cancels out your life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lovely way to think of it, actually. So I'm curious to know, what was it that inspired the writing of this particular book? I mean, you mentioned that this was like the second most mentioned emotion from the students, but what was it that actually inspired this book for you?
Well, I think I'm not a particularly regretful person. And I'm fortunate to have a pretty good life. I certainly have regrets. Like I think when I was in college, I didn't study as much as I should have, but I got into Yale Graduate School.
I was going to say, it turned out okay though, right?
it wasn't a complete failure. When I was single, I had girlfriends I may have stayed with for too long, but but I'm happily married for many years now.
Yeah.
What got me interested, Haley, is that I see patients on a regular basis, which I really enjoy. And I found that a lot of people I talk to have regrets or anticipate regret. I should have pursued this career. I should have done this. I shouldn't have married this person, and so I thought, God, regret is such a powerful emotion. I was talking with somebody a few years ago who was in her 90s, who was regretting that she got married at 22 to somebody she divorced, 20 years later, and then married somebody else who she was very happy with. But she was, regretting a decision she made over 70 years ago. So I thought, gee, my God, this is a powerful emotion. What does cognitive behavior therapy say about it? And there was almost nothing. So I began looking in the decision-making literature, the behavioral economics literature, and so forth. And regret has been a very important aspect of that. And regret is another anticipated cost of making a decision. Yeah. So when you have people doing pros and cons, like we do in cognitive therapy, the advantages and disadvantages, we often don't say, well, how about regret? How much of a cost will that be? And that's how that was introduced into behavioral economics. That regret is the unseen cost in making decisions.
Yeah. So you talk in the book about getting unstuck from regret and having more clarity and confidence in decision making. Could you talk to us a bit more about this and perhaps share some examples of how people might get unstuck from regret?
Right. Well, I think there are a number of things. I think one metaphor to use about life and about regret is to think about your life as either chapters in a book that you're the author of. Which chapter are you in? Yeah. Or you think about yourself on a train that has many stops. So regret could be a stop on the train. Yeah. Like, somebody who had a patient years ago who was caught in an infidelity, and he certainly regretted it. And we thought, look, that was a stop on the train where you did something you now regret. Let's think about regret as the opportunity to learn and improve your relationship, which in fact, he and his wife, with all the courage and resilience that they could muster, actually improved the relationship as a result of that. I mean, it wasn't easy. So regret could be like a stop on the train or a chapter, and you move on to the next one. So the question is, when you move on to the next station or the next chapter, what have you learned from your decision? And I always think about, we always think about regret as a failure, as opposed to as an experiment. So if your listeners are business people, if you're an investor or an entrepreneur, guaranteed you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to lose money, right? If you're in it, I just learned this week that Uber finally is making money. I mean, think about that. Think about how many billions of dollars Uber brings in and how little they pay their workers. And, now they're making money. What a surprise. Gee, I thought you go into business to make money. But that's the long-term view. So, but if you think about regret as, we carried out this experiment, I tried this behavior, and the outcome wasn't what I wished. how can I learn from that? How can I make things better in the future? The other way I think of using regret is to look at the regrets of other people. So when I was in college and in graduate school, a lot of my peer group were using alcohol and drugs to quite an excess. And I thought, wow, the only thing I really have of any value is my brain. I had no money. I wasn't a trust fund kid. I came from a poor family on scholarship. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to learn from these people?
Yeah.
And that was, don't have a drug problem, don't have an alcohol problem.
Yeah.
And so the cheapest way of using regret is to use the regrets of other people. And there are a lot of examples out there, you know. So regret is an opportunity to learn, to grow, to make yourself better. The problem with some people is that they ruminate and they get stuck on the regret. And we can talk about how to deal with that.
Yeah. So not seeing it as like the final destination, just
Exactly,
as a
right.
stop along
Keep
the
that train
way.
moving.
Yeah,
Keep that
and
train
looking
moving.
and thinking, okay, what are the lessons that I can take from this,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
so that I can actually move forward and make better decisions with more
Right.
confidence
Yeah.
moving
Yeah.
on. But say somebody's really haunted by something that, like you're
Yeah.
talking about this 90-year-old client that's been holding on to this regret for 70
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
almost heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
What a thing to carry, even when she had finally then met somebody that she was happily married to,
Yeah.
holding on to this
Yeah.
time in her life that she can't change. So if somebody's particularly haunted by that, and it didn't work out as they hoped, what might be something people could do with that? Because I'm sure there are many people that hold on to regrets.
Right. I don't think people want to regret. I don't think they want to feel bad. I think they get hijacked by it. It's like it's jealousy or envy. You get hijacked by emotions. And I think a way of looking at it is that, like you can think about regret. You can ask the patient or client, do you think that you're focusing on regret right now? And of course, it's a truism. That's what they're focusing on. What are the costs and benefits of continually to repeat this in your mind? Obviously, it's costly. It makes them depressed, cancels out the present moment. They can't appreciate it. What if you were to accept that it happened and you can't change the past? That's the acceptance piece, which is very liberating in a way. It's kind of like, oh, right, I made a decision that wasn't good. But further, was it all bad? Did you have any children with that person? This person did. So that was a good thing. What is the bigger picture? It's what I call the life portfolio, right? So in fact, this person had so many things for life that were really, really meaningful. We all, it's like we often think when we regret, we often think about this little tiny thing. If I had only done something different, my whole life would have been better. But all of us have a life portfolio. We have, we have our friends, we have our family, we have our spiritual or value systems, we have our community, we have our work, we have our health, we have our ability to learn, to grow, and all that. So if you think about, I have this life portfolio, and you have regret is about something that happened years ago, I can't change. How can I make this life portfolio as good as it can be? Now, maybe it could have been better if you had not made that decision. But right now, the only thing that you have any control over is to make this life better than it is. And one way of doing that is, I grew up poor, so I think one of the advantages, people go, oh, poor Bob, you're poor. I think there were a lot of advantages of being poor. I mean, there are disadvantages, but one advantage that I take with me is the ability to appreciate what I have. I don't take it for granted. And the ability to understand people who don't have less and to have compassion about them rather than scorn and marginalize them, kick them when they're down so you can feel like you're up. That's what people do. So thinking about, if you were to, like one way of thinking about it, Haley, is what I call the negation technique, which is just imagine everything has been taken away. I've used this with, Wall Street people. I've used it with cab drivers in New York, and use it with anybody. Everything has been taken away. You have nothing. You have no body. You have no memory. You have no family. You have nothing. You're absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Now, we'll do a role play. I'll play God. You can say that's miscasting, but I'm going to reach on that one because the actors are on strike. So there's an opening there for me as God. So I'm going to play God, and you can have one thing back at a time. I won't tell you how many you're going to get back. The only way you can get anything back is to convince me that you appreciate it and why you appreciate it. You think about that, or your listeners, And I did this with one guy I'm thinking about, he'd want his daughters back. I said, well, what do you appreciate that? And like tears in his eyes, a tough Wall Street guy. Even the difficult times we had, love them and all this. You want to just wipe back and, why? And I said, well, how about your eyesight? You haven't asked for your eyesight back. What would you want to see and why? Why would you appreciate that? Of course, it was his family. And I said, here's the irony. He had lost a couple of $1 million and been cheated out of a couple of $1 million. So he was understandably angry. I said, here's the irony. You have everything you want back. That's the most important. But because you're so focused on this, you haven't been focused on what's right in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really, isn't it? It's about, I work from a compassion-focused perspective. And when you were talking, it's like people get in threat. When you're in regret, you're in threat. So you're really narrow focused, aren't you, on this one thing? Like this man, you've lost money, and all you think about is how am I going to get my money back? How am I going to get my money back? And it's really about zooming out, isn't it? Like zoom out, so you've got a big picture of your life, so you can put lots of things into perspective. I love that concept of life portfolio. Like there is so much more than this one thing, isn't there?
It is, right. And to think about, Paul Gilbert's an old friend of mine who developed compassion-focused therapy. And Paul is actually authentically a compassionate, warm. He does the walk, he does the talk, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, he's a wonderful guy. He's a real mensch. But, it's like, you can even think about compassion as the antidote to regret. If you want to be inoculated about regrets, focus on compassion on a daily basis.
Yeah,
focusing on loving kindness to every living creature that you can think of, even the ones who have passed on. Like if you practice a loving kindness prayer or meditation, that, like thinking about, like I can think about Paul Gilbert right now and wish him well and kindness and his wife Jean, and think about what a wonderful person is, how I love him as a friend. And I feel better already.
I don't have room for regret. Missing them now.
I don't have room for regret. I'm too much caught up. I'm hijacked by compassion. And so, and to think about it is that people who regret that my life could be better. One thing I was talking with a patient once who was regretting he didn't make more money. And I said, do you think there are any people who envy you? And of course, if you think subjectively, it would be like 99% of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
We don't realize how lucky we are, even when we think we're unlucky.
Yeah, it's that perspective shift, isn't it? But you've got me all warm and thinking about Paul and Jean now. So let's just do a little shout out to them because they are honestly beautiful humans.
Kisses to Paul and Jean.
Yeah. So lovely. But it really is that perspective piece, isn't it? I mean, there are people looking at me and you and people listening that are looking at our lives and saying, gosh, I wish I had a life like that.
Yeah.
And we're looking at other people's lives, maybe saying, I wish I had a life like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing how we often go around idealizing other people's lives. And the reason we do that is we don't know them.
We don't know what's behind the curtain.
Exactly. We don't know what's behind the curtain, Haley. And what's behind the curtain can be pretty gruesome, And, you look at these celebrities, incredibly talented people with enormous money and fame, celebrity and opportunity, overdosing on drugs, on their fifth marriage and in and out of rehab. It's a very difficult time. It's a very difficult experience, I think, being a celebrity, because you have a should statement all the time.
Yeah.
I should be happy all the time. I should never have any difficulties. My partner should do everything I want because I am so famous.
Yeah.
That's a absolute guarantee for being miserable.
Yeah.
There's a concept that I found very helpful called adaptive humility, which is not I'm a doormat or I'm less than people.
Yeah.
It's that I'm a human being just like everybody else. I don't deserve any better treatment. I'm not any better than anybody else. I'm not worse than other people, but I can always learn from my mistakes, and I can always respect other people for who they are.
Yeah.
Adaptive humility, you can see the connection with compassion.
Yeah.
Adaptive humility, the people who have adaptive humility, one, have better marriages. Second, are considered better friends. I mean, you don't want a friend who never says they're sorry, right?
Yeah.
And it allows you to live in the real world. So if you don't have everything at 100%, you have it at 80%, you can say, well, let me try to be content with 80. I could try for 85 or 90%, but while I'm doing that, let me try for contentment. Let me say yes to 80% and make the best of that.
Yeah.
I was thinking about contentment with a patient who he was talking about aspiration of trying to be, wealthier, more successful. And he was a physician. And I said, can you remember a time in your life when you felt just really content, like this moment is really a peaceful, wonderful, complete moment, just as it is? He said, I was doing my residency and I was sitting outside and there was this pond outside where the hospital was, and there were ducks. And my friends and I were just sitting there looking at the ducks. So this was the duck cure for his frustration with not being a maximizer, not having everything. The ducks don't have everything. The ducks are ducking in and out and happy to be in a little pond, hanging out with Daisy and Donald over here. They're content. There's this contentment that seems to be a difficult concept in a culture where we're always pushing ahead.
Yeah.
We never get to stay in the moment and be content and settled and peaceful.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. I mean, we do live in a society, don't we, where striving is really rewarded. It's like, just keep going for the next thing, going for the next thing. And when I'm working with people, I'll always say, take time to slow down and actually celebrate where you're at.
Exactly.
And spend some time where you're at.
Right.
But also that piece you were saying about, when we look at other people, I'll say to people, be very wary when you're looking at all the shiny stuff online.
Oh, God.
That's the marketing.
Right.
That's not the story. That's the marketing.
Yeah,
and some of it will be genuine stories. And a lot of it is people who are putting out what they want the world to see. So we don't want to be comparing ourselves to something that potentially isn't that real.
Here's a homework assignment for every day for the rest of your life. Count the number of things you see that are being marketed that you deep down inside you don't need.
Yeah.
And one, you'll save a lot of money. And two, you'll have a lot less envy.
Yeah. I can't remember where I heard it. It was probably at one of Paul's trainings. But I can't remember who it was who said, I love going down to the markets on weekends to realize how much stuff I don't need.
I only take one empty bag and return with one empty bag.
Yeah.
That's liberation. It's sort of like needs are hijacks. Like, I need this new Apple, device or computer or technology or new wardrobe or whatever it is. I think one of the things about the pandemic is that, people were no longer going into an office wearing fancy office clothes.
Yeah.
I have all these suits in my apartment. They're really nice suits. I haven't worn any of them for over 3 years.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for the suits, Haley. The suits, they feel, I go and I talk to them. I said, it's not about you. You're a good suit. The other suits, you're also good suits. But I just haven't had a need for you. But I will check on you periodically.
Yeah.
Maybe put it on, wear a tie, and then put you back in the closet for 6 months. Don't take it personally. Right? Get to know your other suits.
Hopefully the suits aren't having too much regret just hanging there, not living their full and meaningful life.
Right.
Love it. Love it. So when we think about people in business making decisions, we want them to be able to make decisions with clarity and confidence and not get caught up in regret. So I guess, the things you're saying is remembering that, if we do something and it doesn't work out, it's not a failure. It is just data, isn't it? It's just an experience that we can
it's
take
part
some
of the
lessons
process.
from.
Yeah. It's part of the process. It's part of the learning process. You try something out, it works, it doesn't work, you try to improve it. There's an interesting book on the history of design called Success Through Failure. And what it is that what a lot of designers, engineers, or whatever, or product designers do is they try to see where the limits are on this product, like where the limits are on a computer or a bridge or something that you design or piece of technology, and to see where it will fail. I mean, the goal is to find out where it will fail, because that will tell you where the improvements can be made. I mean, if you think about Steve Jobs from Apple, he was a genius at this, and so there's a sense in which we can think of that's a contradiction: success through failure. But if you have a failure and then you think, gee, I can learn better. When I used to do a lot of windsurfing or sailing, what you do when you are doing windsurfing or sailing, if you want to get better, you sail as close to the wind as possible without falling over, which means you fall over.
Yeah.
But that's how you learn how to sail in heavy winds.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it exciting, kind of looking for pushing the limit. So it's an analogy, I think, for the idea of thinking about things not working out as experiences you learn from and you grow from. It's an opportunity emotion.
Yeah. It's almost like, get really good at failing, so to speak.
That's a great way of.
Again, I can't remember who I heard it from, so I can't credit them, but it was like, learn to fail quickly and move on.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's kind of like we often think that we have to avoid failure. So for your business people, your investment people, a lot of my patients over the years have been investment people in New York, and if they're not investing the money that they've been allocated, which means that they're going to lose some investments. If they just hold all of it in cash, they're going to get fired. So which means that they're paid to take risks. They're paid to be active, because that's how you beat the market, by being active. So if you think about that taking risks is part of success, on the other hand, there are some people who don't assess risk appropriately, and they think they're geniuses. For example, this whole Bitcoin thing, SBK, and this whole fraudulent company, taking down billions of dollars with a fake product, taking risks, thinking you'll never get caught. So when they've looked at some of the regrets that business people have, it's that they didn't invest enough, they didn't take risks, they didn't start their own business, that kind of thing. Failing failing at things are the steps you take in business towards success. I mentioned Uber. You can say Uber failed for all these years because it made no money, but what it built up was market share and a customer base, in a product, in a brand. And so now, I mean, Amazon didn't make money for a long time.
Yeah. Exactly.
Total failure, Amazon, right?
Yeah. So that's the thing, isn't it?
We
need to move forward, and some of that is going to involve things not working. If we don't take the risks, we stay where we are, we're never even going to have the opportunity to live full and meaningful lives.
Right. Yeah. I think one way of looking at it if you're honest with yourself and you say, I never have had any regrets, I think three things. One, you're not honest with yourself. Two, that you haven't lived a full life because you haven't taken the
Yeah.
risks. And third, you haven't learned from your experience. It's like
Yeah.
one of the chapters in my book, If Only, is, people often think guilt is such a bad thing. Oh, we have to erase guilt. But imagine if you were single, you were looking for a partner for a long-term relationship, and you met this person that you liked each other, you were attracted to each other. But this person said, hey, I got to tell you something. I like you, but there's a module in my brain that's missing. That's the capacity for guilt and shame. I never feel guilty. I never feel shame, and I never anticipate it. How likely would it be you'd want to form an intimate, close, lifelong relationship with somebody without the capacity for guilt? Why has guilt evolved? If it's always so bad, why has hunger evolved? Because it told people, it's signal, you have to eat something. Same thing with thirst. There are some people who have the absence of thirst, and those people get dehydrated and collapse. So guilt is a social emotion that helps us, one, avoid acting against the interests of other people and ourselves. And second, it helps us repair relationships. So if somebody, I never apologize, I did what I did because I am who I am. How could you have a good relationship with somebody who thinks they're only an individual and they're trying to live in a world with other people? So that individualism about, I just do who I am, I do my own thing, you have to live with it. Those are people who are constantly trampling on the feelings and rights of other people. So when people give an apology, the best apology is going to be one that you fully acknowledge your own suffering in hurting somebody. That I feel so bad that I hurt you, that I had a hard time sleeping and I couldn't think of anything else. I hope you'll forgive me, but I can understand why you might not. In other words, don't act entitled to an apology. An apology is the gift that somebody else can decide to give or not give.
So when regret shows up in our lives, sometimes it, like we said earlier, it is a good thing because it helps you reflect. It helps you slow down and look at what is it that I've done, or what is it that's happened. What can I learn from this?
Right.
What's the next station I want to arrive at on my train?
Exactly. Right. There's always a next station on your train. And it's something that we often get focalized on one thing. Like if you think back about the whole spectrum of your life, from your early childhood to now into your future self, right? And you think about all these different chapters and different personifications of Haley or Bob or whatever. That's a lot of information. Why should we narrow it down to this one thing? Right?
Absolutely. So writing a book is such a huge undertaking, and you've written many of them, which is amazing. What's been your biggest learning through writing your books? And are there still other books that you'd like to write?
Good questions. So I've written and edited 29 books, and I'm working on the third edition of the Treatment Plans for Depression and Anxiety book that we hope to finish up in the next few months to be published by Guilford. I don't know. I mean, I've thought about what drives me at this point in my life is that I want to write. I want to work on a book. I want to write something that I want to read. I want to write something that I'm interested in, not just simply to add something to my resume or the royalties, which will not change anything in my life. It's a sort of think about, like, I've been toying with the idea of writing a sort of a political psychology book about populism. So, we have Trump in the United States, but we have populists all over Europe. In Eastern Europe, you have Orban, and Putin's a populist. You have populists on the left, like Chavez in Venezuela when he was alive. Um, so what are the psychological factors that drive populism? And, it's like if we say, somebody's a racist, that's why they're a populist. That doesn't help us explain why they're a racist. It's sort of like, it's like saying, oh, somebody has opinions different from me, so therefore it's stupid. That doesn't explain why they have those opinions. Plus, there are a lot of people who are populists who are very smart. Um, so I'm really intrigued by that. I'm intrigued why it's so popular.
Yeah.
And I think I have some ideas, but that would be a real challenge. So
Yeah.
I don't really know what my next book is going to be. I mean, I don't want to be signing any contracts in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, fair enough. And what do you think have been your biggest learnings through the process of writing? And I guess, have you had any regrets through your writing process?
I haven't thought about having regrets in writing. I mean, I think if you talk to somebody who does a lot of writing, they'll acknowledge it's painful. I was talking with a colleague just last week, published a lot of articles and books. We were talking about this. He said it's actually for him physically painful to write. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's physically painful, but it's painful. I got to sit down and write this one. I think what I've learned about writing is that you have to be disciplined. You can't wait for the muses to show up and inspire you. So what I do is I try to schedule like an hour on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, Sunday, where I'd write, or I try to write. And you can get a lot done if you do that on a regular basis. If you do that for, let's say, 45 weeks, and you write 6-7 pages every week, you have a manuscript, 320 pages or something. What I've learned from writing is I've learned from writing that it actually helps me become a better therapist. So if somebody, like I wrote a book, The Worry Cure. So if somebody comes in with worry, I'm ready. I am ready for that. Or I wrote a book on jealousy. Jealousy, that's my thing.
Yeah.
The other thing is what I should do is I should put all my patients as my co-authors, because without them, I would have no material. I mean, you've seen this, Haley. You've seen people who are academics who never see patients, who write about clinical stuff.
You're
thinking, what world are they living in? These are not real people. These are theories and abstracts and philosophical grandstanding or whatever. So, so I think about writing as it actually keeps me interested in seeing patients, because I'm always curious, how does that make sense to this person? How does that work for this person? And then how can I help them? But also, how can I help other people understand that I've heard their story listening to this person in front of me? Everybody has a story.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm plagiarizing. I'm plagiarizing. That's what I've learned. I'm taking other people's lives and their dialogues and their inspiration and their disappointments, and I'm using it for my own profit.
Well, maybe you're honoring them in a way of, being in service to many people, because I'm sure throughout all the books you've written, you will have touched many, many lives.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, because I'm up we have a weekend house 100 miles from New York in a very rural area. This is where I do all my writing. There's 78 acres of forest over here, largest wetlands in Connecticut over here. All we have here are chipmunks and birds and fox and, deer and stuff like that.
Oh, wonderful.
This is where I do all my writing. So I think of myself, I'm just sitting here at this little desk, typing away. And then somebody halfway across the world, sends me an email. I've read this. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Somebody outside of this little village knows about my work.
Of course. Well, like I say, this is like a full circle for me, because on my bookshelf is, a book I bought very, very early in my career that you've written. And then I was like, oh, wow, I'm going to interview Bob for my podcast. This is so cool. So if you were only able to give one piece of advice, and I know that can be hard to distill it down, but what would you most want our listeners to take away from our conversation today?
That you're the author of your own life, and you don't have to be stuck on a previous chapter or a previous station on the chain. You can write the next chapter, You have to think about what you want that to be. I mean, we often, there's a whole area called narrative psychology, like, thinking about the story of your life. Think about the story that you want to write in the next chapter. Think about what you want that train to be. And think about how you can use your regret as a checklist of what to do differently in the future, right? It's kind of like if you look back and you think about the mistakes that you've made or things that didn't work out, collect that as useful information. So remind yourself, don't treat other people this way, or don't take risks that are unnecessary, or don't overdrink, or don't do this or whatever. But do this. Live a life that you would be proud of. Become the person that you would admire. That's how Aristotle defined virtue. To become the person that you would admire. Would you admire somebody who's cruel and selfish, or would you admire somebody who's kind and compassionate, like Paul Gilbert? Become Paul Gilbert. I think that's what it's all about.
I'm going to have to contact him after this and let him know he's got much love and many shout outs on this podcast.
He knows I'm a crazy person, so he might discount it.
Yeah, I might just let my listeners know, for anybody who would like to know a bit more about Paul, there's an episode, I think episode 4 of the podcast, I'm interviewing Paul as well, so you can go and have a listen to him. So I just wanted to say as well, when you were talking before about you set aside like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you allocate an hour, and you don't wait for that sort of magical moment to arrive. You just sit down and you have the willingness to do the work. I was thinking in terms of, business, where people are kind of working on a project in business or working on their marketing or whatever it is. These things can be really helpful, can't they? To just say, this is actually what I'm going to schedule in for myself. This is what I'm going to do. And I need to have the willingness, not necessarily the motivation, to sit down and do it. So thank you for sharing that. So this next question I asked to all of my guests, and it's my favorite question, is if you could meet your 80-year-old self, what do you think he would say to you?
Hurry up.
Hurry up.
No, I think my 80-year-old self would say, keep doing what you're doing, assure balance in your life, keep yourself close to the people and to the things in life that have eternal value, like nature and love and kindness. And don't forget that you grew up poor, you had a hard time, but you overcame those obstacles. Other people are dealing with their obstacles. There's always something to learn. I mean, like Cicero wrote many useful what they would call letters, were actually essays, as dialogues or as letters to other people. He wrote one on old age. And one of the things he says is that when you get older, you're not driven by all the desires and ambition that you have when you're younger. You kind of are where you are. And the other part is that as long as your mind is working, you can always learn. So I think about Aaron Beck, the founder of cognitive therapy, who died a couple of years ago at the age of 100. And we called him Tim, his middle name. Tim, a week before he died, he was listening to audiobooks because he had macular degeneration, he couldn't see. He was listening to audiobooks, and he had a wide interest in audio, in all kinds of things. And he was working on research projects, and he was co-authoring books.
Wow.
And his mind was intact to the very end. And so if you think about, as long as you have the life of the mind, I have, this is my study because I have all these books. I have thousands and thousands of books. I have thousands of books on my iPad, and I plan to buy other books I won't read.
Yep.
So what I think
everybody.
about, I've got to live a very long time because I have an obligation to these books, and I have an obligation to those suits in my closet.
Yes. Maybe you could put your suits on and read some books.
I think that's a brilliant idea, and now you've solved my problem, and I feel like a complete human being now. But
You're welcome.
but it's an interesting thing, because people think about people who are older are going to be depressed and miserable. It's actually the highest rates of depression are people in their 20s.
Yeah.
That wasn't always the case, but it is the case in today's world.
Yeah.
Today's world of alienation.
Yeah, absolutely. So finally, if people want to find out more about you, get in touch, where can they find you and engage in your work? And I'll put some links in the show notes of the episode as well.
They can come to New York City and go to Grand Central Terminal, take the number 6 train up to 58th Street. Okay, that's probably not a good idea. We have a website, cognitivetherapinyc.com, and you can go to Amazon or any similar book platform, and all my books are there. My books have been translated into, I think, about 23 languages.
Wow.
I sometimes don't know, because sometimes people publish the books and don't contact the publisher for the right to publish, but they've been translated into almost all the major languages.
Yeah, fantastic.
So it's available.
Well, thank you again, Bob. This honestly has been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I have no doubt that people will get a lot from listening to this episode as well.
Well, it's great to speak with you, and I think what also made it great is we had the same laughter.
Yes. What's the saying? A day without laughter is a day wasted.
Right. One of the metrics I use when I'm talking to people about choosing friends or partners is who can you be silly with? Like, if you think about this, make a list of all the people you know and check them off on the silliness meter, right?
Yeah.
And I'll bet the people you feel closest to, you can be the goofiest with.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just fortunate enough last week to celebrate my 10th wedding anniversary with my darling husband. And one of the things that we talk about that we love so much about our relationship is we have laughed together every single day we've known each other.
That's a great, one of the predictors of recovering from trauma is the number of times you recall laughing in the previous year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's the Irish sort of therapy. Joke your way out of misery.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so grateful to you for coming on the podcast.
Same here. Haley, you have a great day, great evening, and thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure for me too.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you for sharing this time with me today. I hope your time here was helpful and supportive. If there has been something in this episode that you've found helpful, I invite you to share it with another person you think might benefit. If you've benefited in any way from the podcast, please do me a favour and show my pod some love by giving it a 5-star rating and review. Ratings, reviews and shares really help to increase awareness and reach of the podcast, meaning I can spread helpful information more widely. All reviews are welcome and much appreciated, as I know they take time out of your day. If you'd like to be notified when the next episode airs, please use the link in the show notes to join my mailing list. If you have any particular topics you'd like to learn more about, or guests you'd like to hear from, please reach out and let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Music and editing by Nissa Ray. Thanks, Nissa. I wish you all well in your relationship with yourself and your business, and may you go well and go gently.